world feels a bit toxic and blah these days, doesn't it? The same old people coming up with the same old solutions for big problems that still don't work. We need to change the game. Well, welcome to Women Advancing. Join me, host Kate Byrne, in this dynamic bi-weekly podcast, bringing together female founders, funders, and thought leaders. Listen to the people driving change, how they got there, how you can help, and yep, how you might just be the next one to advance. Proof that all ships rise with women at the helm. That's what happens when Women Advance with Kate Byrne.
Our guest is Divya Agarwal, and she's the founder of Vivekam. Vivekam translates into discernment, a key anchor to her practice of what she now refers to as ROI and the 7 I's of the ROI. What are they? You have to listen to find out. I think you'll also really enjoy her definition of AI. Tune in, check it out. We are so fortunate today to get to be speaking with Divya Agarwal, who's the founder of Vivekam. Divya, yay, we made this happen.
We made it happen. And I have to say the good fortune is mine. This is my second conversation with you, and I always enjoy our vibes. So thank you.
Thank you. So, and everyone is in for a real treat, I'm just saying, because Divya, her wisdom and her experience, and also just everything really about her, it's got, there's a calming aspect to it, but then there's also so much energy. It's a really beautifully, I'd say, channeled flow. So enjoy and take lots of notes.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, no pressure.
I'm blushing. I'm blushing if you can sense. I'm blushing through the Zoom screen.
All right. Well, let's start at the very beginning, as the song says.
Okay.
And we were just talking a little bit about this when we were getting set up. Everybody seems to think that, everyone's path is a straight line. And if it's not a straight line, you're getting it wrong. And you and I both know, woo-hoo, that is so rare.
Yeah.
Share a little bit about your journey and how you found out, came to where you are today.
Yeah, happy to. And can I be provocative and say, actually, if it is a straight line, I don't like to say that we're doing things wrong or right, but can I say like you're doing it wrong if it is a straight line? Is that okay to say that? If it's linear, there's something you're missing out on a lot, you're leaving a lot on the table. Maybe I'll say it like that. Yeah, so starting from the beginning, grew up in Fargo, North Dakota. I'm an immigrant's kid, so first generation Indian American. And there's probably a few things from my childhood that have shaped, I want to say now looking back, on the footsteps from behind that have shaped where I am today. So being an immigrant's kid, I feel like listeners can assume that education and like achievement are a big part of the ethos, the culture growing up. That was definitely a big part of mine. My mom, I should say she is a physician at her heart. She just retired this year. She's a neonatologist, so she was a physician here working with premature babies. My dad, academic in physics. So yeah, just this theme of getting well educated, kind of being on the path was pronounced for me growing up. I would also say coupled with that was the spirit of provocation. Maybe that's why I led with a bit of provocation. I give credit to my father for that. He had a way of, I think as an immigrant, you have to be able to challenge or have voice really well and stand your ground really well in a country where you're trying to make it work for yourself and your family.
Yeah.
And the way provocation showed up, I'd say, in my life was in school, just kind of wondering if the teacher was teaching us something. I would ask a lot of questions. I would wonder why we're learning things in a certain way. I always felt that students should have a little bit more agency over their learning, meaning there should be more of a culture of bilateral communication versus just like unilateral teacher to student. That showed up. I did speech and debate in high school, which as any good immigrant kid would do. But, I had themes like some of the titles of my speeches were things like Hegemony Cricket, which was exploring how I thought Disney was a bit biased in its manifestation across racism and sexism and other isms within their films. One of my speeches was called Poison Ivy League, which was my dissection and maybe experience of being in a school system that seemed very geared towards getting us to prestigious schools, which is a value, and I get that. It just felt like we were learning specifically for that versus learning for the sake of learning and really exploring ideas. That I think is our birthright in a way of being a kid.
Right.
So yeah, so that I'll just leave that as one element that was very prevalent in my childhood. A second was and I can say this now looking back, is this idea of movement and really finding play through movement. So I had the good fortune of playing outside a lot as a kid. I wasn't, I didn't have my tech tools with me when I was a kid. I was a gymnast, competitive gymnast, which had its own dark sides to it. But
I
I
bet.
found a lot of play and space and just like comfort in movement and dancing and just being in movement. I can't really say it better than that. My grandfather in India, so I would spend mornings with him doing yoga. That was actually my first taste at the age of like 6 or 7
Oh my
doing
God.
yoga. And it definitely came more from a place of like, ooh, I'm a gymnast. I can do all these fun things. But now I actually come to appreciate not just that bonding that he and I had, but even
Spirit.
some of the spirit, some of the things I got to touch into at that point. Now I've been a yogi for 20 years in my adulthood, and just being in the body is a big part of who I am. Finally, I'll say, the cliched, like being in the shoes of a variety of experiences is important. It was important for me growing up in a household that focused on education so much, in interacting with a world that was very different than mine. So I would say I grew up relatively upper middle class and very privileged, not just economically, but for the fact that I had parents that were very invested in my development. So,
Right.
I had the father that was like checking in with my teachers every other week and making sure I had extra homework and like doing math games at my birthday party. That's a little crazy, you might say. And yet it really signifies a parent that
Right.
is like all in on their kid being successful in a very unfair and potentially harsh world.
Right. Right.
And so in that vein, my parents never pressured me or encouraged me to find work outside of the house growing up. And I had a calling and yearning to be involved in the outside world, I would say. And so I took on a variety of like, high school, junior high jobs. Like I was a paper girl for a while for the Fargo Forum.
Look at
I was
you.
a sandwich artist at Subway. I worked in a call center doing debt collections. I was a hostess in a truck diner. And I think that just speaks to like, I can't conceptually understand things. I have to actually be in an experience, even for a little bit of time, to have a taste for it. And that's, I think, also part of being embodied or being in the body,
Right.
helps me move and understand the world more than simply through my mind.
Yeah. The
That's a little bit about
kinesthetic,
me. Yeah, the kinesthetic piece.
kinesthetics of it all.
Yeah,
Um,
and I know that we're similar on that. On that.
Very much so. And it's such a way, and I think you're right, because it's almost as though I've decided that when I'm kinesthetically engaged in experiencing something, it literally is imprinting. Think of
Yes.
it like a henna tattoo inside,
Yes. There's
right?
a word in the world of energetics, there's a world called templating. So those
Ah,
of us who are more kinesthetic, we template well by observation, but it's not that we're templating through here. Our bodies are actually mirroring and absorbing, right, the experience that's in front of us.
oh,
Yeah,
interesting. That is,
it's a really helpful word, templating. I
no,
find
it
it to be a
is.
helpful word, I should say.
Yeah, no, it helps me right there. That explains a lot of things for me. Now, I
Yeah.
also have to ask, your dad, it was fantastic that he took such an interest also as his daughter
Yeah. Yeah.
being involved in these things, and your grandfather too.
Yeah. I mean, my grandfather on my maternal side, I would say my mom was first in her family, so she was oldest of five.
Oof,
At a time she was born in the 50s in India where women had a very kind of prescribed path, and even in some ways still do, but it's changing in India. The fact
right?
that her father was it highly endorsed and recommended that she go into medicine, and she kind of followed what her father encouraged, and there was a lot of support for that was huge. Like what she did in her time, and then what she did when she came to the States in her time, is incredible. My family has started a foundation focused in rural India, specifically on educating an opportunity for young women, so childhood girls in rural India, because of the cultural wiring around educating girls.
That's
Can I make a reference to a Sex in the City episode? And you can cut this out if you
please.
want.
Yeah, bring it.
There's there's an episode where I don't know if people are familiar with whatever you might cut this out, but I have to share the story.
Do.
One of the characters is dealing with a prenup, and like any good, I think, investment decision, one should have a prenup. But she's basically looking at the terms, and it's a pretty low amount. And I think one of the characters just says like, "Oh, you only get money if you have sons, not daughters." She's like, "That's just bad business."
Right.
And I think that that is we've come to understand from a company, like from a country standpoint, maybe this is where we resume the the recording. So
Right.
when I think about our family's intention towards investing in young girls in India, and it's not just our foundation, there are many organizations doing incredible work in this vein.
Right.
It's a recognition, not just a moral and fairness argument. It's a recognition that for countries to do well economically, girls, women are one of the best investments, highest return stocks, if you want to say it like that, that you could make.
Yes, the
Yes.
portfolios are always outperforming. I mean, and
Yes.
there's so many. I've done so much research on all of this and talked about it till I was blue in the face, but it just is.
It
And
just
it's not
is. You
just,
can't deny it. And we had a lot of sociological conversations around it, but the facts are what they are.
yeah, exactly. What was your favorite? Like, were you a bar girl? Were you the uneven bar? Were you the beam? Were you the dance?
I can tell you what I wasn't. I was definitely not a bar girl. Floor and beam were my events. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
that makes sense. And the beam, I
Yeah.
mean, you have to be so incredibly focused.
Yeah. It's a scary
And
event, but it's a very enriching event.
I would think gratifying too. Talk about going back to what your provocation at the beginning, talking about how
Yeah.
reasons why when you are so linear, when one is linear, the reason why you lose so much, you lose out on so much is that it's when you're kind of going outside those lines, that edge, that's where the growth and the strength comes
The
from.
Bardo. Yeah. Like the liminal space,
Yes,
the
exactly. And
groundlessness.
on the
Yeah.
beam, hello.
Well, yeah. And I want to say maybe for some of us, I think for all, like, I shouldn't say for all of us, for many of us who are like type A in our way, or there's a part of us that's type A, right? We're multiple infinite parts. It is nice to have things that feed your linearity, right?
Yeah,
Like you need to be able to nourish that part of yourself and not deny it. And I would actually
right.
say the beam kind of works for us who like clean lines and precision.
Yeah.
And then the floor is like where you get to have your play space.
Right. You get to color outside the lines.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well, so with all that in mind, what skills did you rely on early days? Like I'm thinking back to
Yeah.
you did McKinsey, you did so many different things.
Yeah. At the risk of these sounding cliched, I'll go for it because I actually think they are
Yeah.
skills that mattered. Like one is just like being proactive. So what did that look like? And I'll say just being okay with if you want to use the word rejection or just not hearing back. So I think a big skill was just if you find something that you want, five people associated with that and reach out and like try to have conversations. And you may not hear back from them. You may hear back from them that they can't make time for you, or you may hear back from them that they can make time for you. And so that looked like, yeah, just going to events where companies were having presentations that I wanted to be a part of, like going to office hours a lot with my professors. My friends would make fun of me that I go to office hours a lot. And I was like, but wait, I kind of want to learn more. So why wouldn't I just go? I think that's a big part of it, productivity. So I think embedded within that, right, is the ability to, I don't know if it's taking risk, but I think just this general theme, which probably shows up in being an entrepreneur too, once you're okay with whatever failure is for you, or for me, it might have been like for a lot of us, it might feel like not being seen or being rejected or not hearing back from someone. Once you're okay with that, I feel like the space for play opens up completely, like it's boundless.
Well, and it's to me, it's also a time saver because it means that person
Yes.
wasn't like an energetic fit or it wasn't the right,
Yeah.
it wasn't going to get you where you wanted to go.
Yeah.
And it just leaves you more space for someone who you never would have thought of or
Yeah.
never would have.
Yeah. Like in a spiritual way, I'll call it an energetically aligned or non-aligned.
Yes.
In a more material frame, I might just say it's energetically efficient. Like, why wouldn't I just reach out? And if it's not going to go that way, it's not going to go that way.
Yeah.
I do think that that is just like being initiative taking
Yes.
was a skill that still is there with it has a different quality to it now. But that what I'd say when I was a kid, like that helped. And honestly, it's like just throwing hats in the ring. Like I remember at MIT, there was some research I wanted to do in the South Pacific. I saw different venues through which I could maybe apply for funding, and I was like, "What's the worst that happens?" They tell me no.
Right.
And so as long as you're not afraid of being told no or not hearing back or being rejected, I think anything's possible.
And I also think it's not, and you said, just not taking it personally.
Yeah,
Because literally,
because it's not.
it's not. It's just it's not going to work. So now, which ones do you rely on now? Have they changed at all?
Yeah, well, I'd say the initiative or being okay with risk is still there. it's now been, I'll say there's more texture around it or maybe more maturity.
Yeah.
So one is reaching out to actually ask for help, not just reaching out to show your enthusiasm or to, position yourself well, which was what I was doing when I was younger.
Yeah.
Now it is being discerning of what am I struggling with that I could actually share with someone else and get their help. And an example of this actually came up probably 6 months ago, close to a year ago, coming up on the 1 year anniversary.
Oh, wow. Congrats.
And thank you. And in May of this year, I never felt this thing called burnout before. Even, as an AP at McKinsey, I never felt like my soul was tired. And I
Yeah.
definitely felt that in May. And I was like, this is probably what, you hear this word. It likely is what happens when you are leading your own thing and you're really pouring your blood, sweat, and tears into it. And I actually reached out to a few friends who had been on this journey for a while. And I just like named it. I was just like, hey guys, I'm feeling this. Is this a natural part of the process? Or like, help me
Right.
just like process this. And it was very affirming simply to know like they had experienced something similar. And that actually gave me the energy to say, okay, cool, like be there, don't stay there. Let me like be with this and know that it's natural and trust that I will move on from this. But I also learned, some things I need to now manage to be more mindful of the fact that burnout can creep in.
Right. And
So I'd
also,
say that's one, and I'm trying to do it more and more. It doesn't come easy, but just the fact that I'm aware of it, and I really encourage my clients, younger clients, to take advantage, not in a transactional way, but really
right.
lean into this ability to ask for help because I think it is a true skill of like professional maturity, overall maturity.
Yep.
The second is around my initiative taking, like having more space around that. So an example might be if I get a question or I get I get a request in the interpersonal realm or in the professional realm, I'm okay saying, confirming receipt of your request. I'm going to take a moment and get back to you, or let me come back to
Right.
you on that. And coming from a professional world, at least at the time, I know it's changing, but the pace or rhythm of big institutions like private institutions, corporates, definitely in the 2000s, 2010s, there's still, I mean, maybe it still exists. I'm not in that world right now. So, but there's just like immediate need for response and like assuming that you're just always supposed to respond right away. And the rhythm is very reactive. It's very fast. And I can thrive in fast environment. And I find myself more effective when there is space within the pace, if I can say it like that.
Right. I like that.
So, yeah,
Okay.
space within the pace.
And, the other thing too is when you do respond, so you can, either you can give an answer or it can be a thoughtful response. So it can be fully
Yeah.
formed, right? And I think that's
Yeah.
the beauty of that pause and
And it
that
can be both. It can be like, here's instinctually what comes up, but I want to give it
right.
some more thought. And I remember, I give my father credit for this again. He would coach me, not really coach me, but any father, maybe Indian father more so, is
Yeah.
very like, they like to give you advice. My interviews in undergrad, he would say, remember, Beta, like if you get a question that you don't know the answer to, it's okay to say, I don't know, but I'll come back to you on that.
Right. Which is great. And
That's
it's true.
huge to
That
hear
is
that
huge.
at a young age.
Absolutely. And then also just frankly to have the confidence to even state that. And then it shows follow up when you do it. So you really set yourself up.
You're doing all the things well. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. It's very adult. Well, so okay, we're talking now, starting to kind of shift a little bit into all the many different generations
Yeah. Yeah.
in the land, and everyone's under one roof. And you and I have had some good conversations about, just in general, building trust. How do we do that in this environment, both when there are multiple different types of generations, you've got now also different multiple cultures, distributed workforce, now we're not going to get political, but crazy politics, which impacts everything, right? I mean, we all feel it.
Can I answer your question with a question? What are you
Yeah.
seeing that might indicate there's less trust than there used to be, or just that trust isn't as much as we want it to be?
I think what I'm seeing or what I've experienced, or even when I'm listening to my daughters sometimes talking about situations, and I think there's people not wanting to necessarily even go into the workplace because they feel like it's because they're being monitored, as
Okay.
opposed to the potential positive of it, where
I
you'll get
see. Okay.
interaction and interactivity. And it's not, I also understand there are certain organizations that do that. So I'm not saying that's true for everybody, but I also think from the older generation looking, if someone is getting the job done and they're doing what they're doing and they're healthier, meaning they're not everybody's taking sick days, not that it's bad, but you know what I mean? There's
Mm-hmm.
a better mental well-being in your culture, and that comes from people not being there all the time.
Yeah.
And what's the problem? Why are you saying, okay, you have to be here, and if you're not, we're going to fire you? I mean, that's just odd. Don't
Yeah. Yeah.
shoot your foot off, it seems to me.
What I know I've experienced and then maybe have heard anecdotally, let me make an assumption to start, or let me just assert a hypothesis. All these generations, this isn't even a hypothesis. Factually, we've grown up in different eras. So the way we think about the world and then maybe what we expect from work or we expect from ourselves or expect from others looks different. If that's true, then maybe in the workplace, we're walking in with certain assumptions around what motivates this 18-year-old versus what motivates this 28-year-old versus what motivates this 38-year-old, 48-year-old, et cetera. So we're making assumptions, and at least I notice myself making assumptions for sure about what one's motivations are, maybe even what one's intentions are
Mhm.
in asking for things or requesting things or not doing certain things.
Right. Right.
So if that, at least I can just speak from my experience, if that's true, I guess I'll say what I've noticed can be an antidote to that. Because I think when you make assumptions and those start getting layered on each other, you start making, you make assumptions and
Story,
therefore
a
trust,
narrative.
and trust breaks down. Because maybe ultimately you assume someone's intention is malintent and they weren't thinking that at all.
Exactly.
Well, I was going to say the antidote, there's layers to this, but the antidote above the water line, if I think about the iceberg, the antidote above the behavior that I would say is an antidote is name what's going on for you, like name the motivation.
Ah,
So I'm not comfortable coming into the workplace 2 days a week, or I don't want to, because frankly, it's not a familiar experience for me. I
right.
entered the workforce where we were hybrid, and so I'm more used to practices of hybrid. I don't quite know what to expect when I go in.
Right.
So just naming, people use the word vulnerability, authenticity, these kind of 10,000 foot words are thrown around. I feel like that's one clear way of being authentic is just name what's going on for you, be honest about it, be straightforward. That requires you knowing what's going on for you.
What just came to me when I was listening to you with that too is there's so much more anxiety in the world. And sometimes that's picked up, sometimes what we're feeling isn't even ours.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's other people's.
Well, it's like the collective consciousness because we're all running under a global nervous system, right? Yeah.
Exactly. And so part of me is also recognizing that for some, especially younger, it is like just too intense. And talk about burnout, you're like on high wire and it's like perform, perform, perform. And then, okay, go home. And then you're just absolutely wiped out.
Yeah. Without making like a generalization, I guess
Yeah.
they're used to interacting more digitally with the masses. Whereas actually for people of my generation, I get burnt out with my phone. I'm more used to interacting with people energetically, like in person.
Yes.
Right. So we've developed a different skill set almost or a way of being just by our circumstances.
Yeah. 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 It's
And so I'd love all generations to, instead of making assumptions, be so aware that we are all operating under different wiring. So just name what's going on for you or name what your motivation is.
this is one of the things that I've talked about. Well, there's two things. One, I have a whole workshop that's based on just power and communication of the different generations and who
Yeah.
does what and does what and just how to get that done. But the other thing too is, and this ties in with your education and your learning and your asking questions, being curious for learning's sake.
Yeah.
I know that there is a certain, some generations who are older take offense when asked certain questions because they feel that either their knowledge or their, I don't want to say, maybe it is power, whatever, is being questioned.
Undermined. Okay.
Undermined, yeah. And that's not it at all, literally, to your point, because we do take things in and we do learn differently and we see things differently. They're simply trying to get a handle on, wow, how'd you come up with that? It's literally
Well,
what,
yeah, and
right?
I do want to say there is, and this is something I work with clients a lot, the open-ended question. Like there are ways to ask questions that will put someone on the defensive
True.
versus invite conversation. I'm not saying that people are asking really directed, closed-ended questions,
Right.
right? But I do think it's all of our responsibility to also ask things in a way without being overly sensitive to the other person. Like, of course, that's a whole other art here. But yeah, there's, I
Right.
think, a way to ask questions in an inviting, curious based.
Yeah. Curiosity. Yeah. And
Yeah.
yeah. What was your inspiration for starting Vivekam?
Yeah. Well, I was actually, when I was talking about this naming piece, I realized I think that's actually a big part of it. So I'm imagining any entrepreneur like starts out with an idea, and of course, as they're more in the market and working with clients, that idea gets refined and hopefully sharpened and more focused. I realize like an inspiration, not of the moment, but I think a deep inspiration for me has been how do we help humans express themselves in times of duress? Because
Hmm.
that's, I think, when human, I mean, this is not earth-shattering. That's when human expression gets compromised and can lead to a lot
Right.
of conflict. So I've just in the last year of working with clients, this 10,000 foot word of discernment, which essentially means like knowing thyself better and then being able to express oneself from a place of greater knowing. My hypothesis is that you have greater discernment, you will be more effective in your work because you'll know where you're going and you'll, when you encounter challenges along the way, you'll be able to name those challenges and maybe find solutions within yourself or with others. So that's Vivekam. Vivekam means discernment. It's a Sanskrit word for discernment. What I'm noticing is naming as a strategy. So I do a lot of work in high stakes situations. One of the situations is interviews when people are trying to get like the dream job they want. And the interview process can be a bit tough.
Yeah.
Or when they're having feedback conversations and they're very afraid of both giving feedback and receiving feedback.
Right.
I work with clients on naming the discomfort. And that takes a lot of I don't want to say it needs to take a lot of courage, but I'm noticing it does take courage. It actually takes courage first to admit or accept or be with, yeah, I feel really uncomfortable. My heart's racing, I'm sweating. I notice that I don't want to be having this conversation.
Right.
Like allow for that. Name that at least to yourself, if not to your counterpart.
Right. Right.
Because of what I think it does is it actually reminds us all, it brings back the humanity in the conversation.
There.
Not that humanity needed to have left, but I do find that we forget that we are all human, reckoning with the same fears or discomforts. So I can
Exactly.
imagine if I'm giving you feedback, I'm not comfortable giving you feedback either. So let's just name the fact that this is not an ideal or uncomfortable situation. Now that we've acknowledged that, now there's space for us to be beyond that discomfort and be in a place of connection.
Right.
So the reason discernment is important is you have to be able to discern place where you are. You
Right.
have to be able to feel and then practice naming that feeling.
From there.
Yeah.
Which is fantastic. And it also goes back to what we were talking about earlier, where when you are in that place, I don't know, yes, it takes courage, but then there's I don't know, kind of like a calm,
The
kind of like
freeing that
there, I
happens
said it,
after. Yeah,
right?
exactly.
It's
And
out
then
of
you're in a place of space and you can speak more freely once you've almost removed that like knot that was there.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I realized Vivekam, it hasn't evolved per se, but it's gotten sharper to realize, yeah, actually Vivekam's calling right now is to support humans in expressing themselves effectively in times of duress. And duress has a lot of different components to it, but typically in high stakes situations, we have a big meeting coming up, got a feedback conversation, I'm up for promotion and I have to like sell my story. There's a lot of, anxiety or energy around these types of events. And Vivekam's mission is to support people and teams through that.
Well, and we couldn't use you more than now, I think, on so many different levels. Seriously. One of the things that I think is really interesting about Vivekam is this notion of the new ROI concept, right? And the 7 I's. So if you wouldn't mind just sort of, I just think they're clever, they're smart, and I think they're really helpful for everybody to just sit with and listen and anchor.
Okay, yeah. Well, thank you for giving me a bit of a platform here to talk about it. So ROI, for those, when you hear ROI, my hope is that most of you think of the phrase return on investment, which tends to be kind of the golden metric by which we think about economic decisions. And it's a very efficient and productive one, right? I'm investing in something. Is there a return on the other side? So I'd like to suggest that beyond capital or money investment, there are skills we can invest in that will return greater effectiveness. In my world, I'll use the word discernment, greater discernment.
Right.
So the 7 skills, no surprise, all starting with the letter I,
Go figure.
go figure, are the following. And while there's an order to them in the linear world, the order is not prescribed, but there is an intentionality with why I would start with actually the word intention. That is the first skill.
Yeah.
The second is introspection, the ability not to ruminate by looking from within, but yes, the ability to look within. Third is the skill of imagination. So the skill of visualizing possibility and actually painting a picture, not only for yourself, but to rally others around something that doesn't yet exist, like possibility.
Yeah.
Fourth is the skill of interdependence. So I'll say this is a fancy way of, I guess, saying the word teamwork, but it's a bit deeper than that. It's the deep recognition that I am only more successful in the interdependent play with others. So this is this idea that you can't go alone. You're always actually interdependently connected.
Right.
And the more that you see that and can be with that and leverage it for everyone's success, the better. That's interdependence.
Right.
That's 4. The 5th is implementation. So this is another word for the ability to experiment. So the ability to like have weekly experiments, which is a big thing I do with my clients. Like, let's play with a skill this week and then notice what it does or doesn't do for you. And that leads to the 6th skill of inquiry. So the ability to be doing stuff, but then always noticing and being curious about what its impact was. Right. So even in a conversation with someone, the ability to be inquiring, oh, I wonder, I showed up like this when she said this. I wonder why that happened or what's going on for me. The 7th and 8th skill, I think, are the 2 that I'm not most excited about, but feel so deeply and dearly about. The 7th skill is the inhale. I'll say more about that in a moment. And the 8th skill is the interlude, and they go together quite well. So the return on the inhale in its most obvious, explicit form is the exhale. The deeper meaning of the skill of inhale is the skill of knowing how to bring your nervous system to a state of calm. Our hypothesis being, and this isn't Vivekam's hypothesis, this is, now in the literature, that the nervous system needs to be in a balance of what we'll call parasympathetic or rest state and the sympathetic or active state. It needs to be in a balance for optimal biological performance, psychological performance, etc. So those who have the skill of nervous system regulation, which a really easy way to start is through breath. So I do a bit of breath work with my clients. That is that skill of the inhale, which is essentially the skill of bringing your nervous system to calm. And then the 8th, which supports that, is interlude, rest, pause, space, what I was mentioning earlier. So those who can recognize when space is required, whether it's in as micro of moments as, gosh, I have back-to-back meetings, I need a 10-minute break before I enter my next call, all the way to, it's not just about getting 8 hours of sleep. It's actually like looking at my sleep as a rest period for all the faculties I have to recharge and restore until the next day, to like naming on a phone call, you know what? I notice I'm feeling a bit tired. If it's okay, I'm going to take 5 minutes and I'm going to give you a call back. Just creating space, like being able to create space in your life, I would say is a skill. And it's a skill of those who are higher performing. Think about athletes, right? There's a reason that recovery and rest are scheduled into their training program because they know it makes them better performers. That is for all of us, not just for athletes.
No, so true. So true. And especially now with us being either online or just, there's so much coming at us all the time. It's so important to just have.
Just pause. You can make sense of the noise from a place of calm. That's it.
Yeah, it's so true. And it's amazing also what you can get done. So many people think, oh, it's going to slow me down. I'm going to miss out. I'm not going to. No, not at all. I find I just had this happen. I was able to write so much better, so much more clearly, concisely, and also just get things done, but really well.
Really well. Yeah.
Well, not
That
just checked it off, not crossed off the little
yeah.
list. Okay, thank God I got that done.
Exactly. It's not about being reactive and just like doing your life. It's about getting to be intentional in each part of your life. That's why it's important to me that it's called ROI,
Yeah,
because I want to suggest, and ideally in a year from now, I'll have like real quantitative proof points for this.
yeah, which
I
is
want to suggest the ROI is actually greater effectiveness. You will be more effective
yeah. And then
by doing less, by being more, being
I
more.
also love, especially with all the fear that's going around about AI. Can you just unpack a little bit about your new interpretation of AI, which I love, and I encourage everyone to embrace this.
So my little kitschy reframe of AI, advanced introspection. So if introspection is simply the ability to look in and know what's going on for me, okay, cool, my heart's racing. Don't know why, but great. I am feeling hungry. Even that's like a form of introspection, like just being able to check in. The advanced version of that is not necessarily making meaning of it. Oh, my heart's racing, my hands are sweaty. I wonder what that means or why. And that can be a part of advanced introspection. I would say the advanced version is knowing how to self-manage so that you get to a place of being from center. So if you
Mhm.
can tell that my heart's racing, my palms are sweating, I'm feeling agitated, I don't really need to dissect why I'm feeling agitated. But before I go into this meeting, I know I'm going to do some breath work, or I'm just going to find my feet on the ground, or I'm going to take a walk around the block to self-manage before I go into the meeting. That for me is a version of advanced introspection, knowing how to bring yourself back to center when
Mhm.
you're, noticing that you're off center. That's introspection. The advanced version is knowing how to bring yourself back.
Yeah, exactly. It's self-advocacy, honestly.
Yeah, in a way that's really practical and embodied. And I have I use ChatGPT in some ways is actually an incredible conversation partner. I've learned a lot about framing and language with ChatGPT about just some of my own, inner neuroses.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, no.
It
So
has its own wisdom.
yeah, no, absolutely true. And that's why I've turned to it more as like a coach, as you just said, a thought partner.
Thought partner.
Yeah, really. It's like, what do you think? And I can either take it or not and go, huh, okay.
That's exactly, and you can trust for the most part. I call her Magnolia, is quite
Nice.
objective because that's what it's been trained. That's all it knows what to do.
Yeah,
Just
exactly.
being
And another
balanced
great,
and kind of stoic in its
yeah. And a
way.
good opportunity to also not take it personally
Yeah.
if she, Magnolia, says to you, I think you might want to. Another way of doing that is,
Yeah.
so as we kind of get ready to sort of close a little bit and wind down, what advice would you give your younger self, knowing what you know now?
I mean, I want to say it would be, I wish I knew where I would ask for more help, but it would be like be comfortable. Yeah, like be comfortable saying like you need help.
Yeah.
That was it still is hard. Or like you're scared, like being
Yes.
comfortable saying like I'm nervous. I'm scared this won't work out. I'm like terrified. I wish I'm able to do that now and I just kind of own that. I wish I could have done that earlier.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like over some big, like around big decisions, professionally and personally, just knowing that it's okay not to have an answer now and like really taking space. That has been by far, like slowing it down has been the biggest shift I have experienced. And I say people have experienced about me since leaving, more of the corporate world.
Yep. And the truth is, not having an answer now is in itself an answer.
Yeah.
Means not yet, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because
It's
especially
okay.
when
And
you're,
it's okay not to. It's okay not to
yes,
know.
exactly. And I think especially when one is as in tune and aligned and anchored, that's where at least my own experience of that is I'll know, I'll just get that feeling. I'll know like I know. There'll be sometimes. And then there are times when I kind of have a little hint of it, but it's not completely, whoosh, and I'm going, oh, but come on, we can make it work. And every time
Exactly.
I've done that, it's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it wasn't there yet for a reason.
Yeah.
So to take a step back. All right. Well, in closing, where do you see the greatest opportunity for women moving
Oh,
forward?
I noticed that what I want to share, I don't know if it's going to be provocative or whatever. I'm just going to go for it. I'm just going to go for it.
Please, no,
Okay.
this is
So I'm going to make a couple of I often do this. Yeah, I'm going to make a couple of what you'd have to believes or just assertions. So assertion one is, in the realm of energy, there is something called a more masculine energy and a feminine energy. And the assertion is we all have that mix within us. It's not that women have more feminine and men have more masculine. We should have an imbalance within us. The second assertion I'll make is, if we believe that there are qualities associated with something called masculine energy, qualities such as assertiveness, initiative taking, competence in communication, this ability to lean in, if those are traits that tend to be affiliated with masculine energy, there's a set of traits affiliated with something called feminine energy. Those traits are things like being more receptive, so receiving versus leaning in.
Right.
The ability to be okay with space, because to receive, you really have to let things settle and like receive what's coming versus being more leaning in and just taking action. Gifts of feminine energy are more they're restful.
Yeah.
The ability to lean into, not necessarily only rely on intuition, but like trust those knots in the stomach or knots in the heart that you feel early on. So when you ask the question about the greatest opportunity for women, I might reframe the statement to say, I see a great opportunity for the gifts of feminine energy
Well said.
to come into the, natural rhythm of, well, it's actually already present in actual nature, in the
Right.
rhythm of how organizations run themselves. That's what I want to say. There is a massive opportunity for the gifts of feminine energy to come into organizations. And what it might manifest as in really explicit ways are things like people being comfortable pausing and saying, let me come back to you. I don't have an answer yet. Just literally slowing down the business rhythm, which at some point also might make companies more long-term oriented, given our extremely short-term oriented mindset around performance, around anything regarding change. And maybe I'll say it'll bring a greater reverence, not for working out just for the sake of like looking good and staying thin. It might bring a greater reverence for movement, which is more affiliated with feminine energy, and just the fact that humans need to move to be well. And
Yeah.
so it's kind of fully reimagining the way that we even like do our desk work. And like standing desks are one evolution in that, but even more reimagining what our workspaces look like.
Yeah.
Engender movement, to engender, like to implement or integrate nature more explicitly, all of that. And there's already movements happening this direction. I just see that there's a great opportunity for that.
Yeah. One of the best things I ever, discovered, and this is when I worked at the Tides Foundation and also George Lucas Education Foundation, which just had they were on beautiful land,
Yeah.
was walk and talks. We
Yeah.
got more done. We got more. There was just so, and bonded and communicate, just everything. It was such a pleasant experience and got nourished from spending time outside
Yeah, absolutely.
and
And like
being
even
human.
starting meetings with like a 5 minute, like or 3 minute silence, like just a check-in with yourself.
Yeah.
I have clients that play with that now. It's like non-negotiable to have an agenda and a non-negotiable to start a meeting with like 3 minutes of silence, like a moment
Yeah.
of silence, which
Yeah.
are all those are energetic feminine attributes for sure.
Right. And kind of grouping and circling everyone. Oh,
Thank you for letting me share that.
no, Divya, I love
Yeah.
that. And this is exactly the purpose. One of the purposes really of Women Advancing, honestly, is to put forth that kind of thinking it's not even thinking, it's practice and reality. It's uncovering these hidden gems that really are all available to so many of us. And it's exciting to see different people from different walks kind of beginning to tap into it. And the more that we talk about it, the more familiar it gets. So then before you know it, we're just kind of doing it. We don't even care why, how it came about, but we
Yeah.
are. And I think it's really important.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing it. All right. So, okay. Very last question. A year from now, Divya.
What do I want it to look like?
Yeah.
Knowing that, I have no idea what tomorrow is going to look like for Vivekam.
I know.
So I have no idea what a year is going to look like. But the aspiration I would have is I'll say at a very practical, tactical level.
Yeah.
I'd like the new ROI to be embedded as a leadership development journey.
Yep.
Within a company or two, to have a real proof of concept, a real pilot here to speak about the outcomes that the new ROI is able to deliver in terms of effectiveness and performance. And I'd like to have real measurable data, both self-reported and maybe more rigorous. I'm still keeping that kind of to be declared what those metrics might look like. But I'd like to have, so those are the two pieces I'd love to have for Vivekam. Pilot proof of concept in one or two organizations and quantitative measures for how skills like the inhale, interlude, implementation, experimentation are moving people in their performance.
Divya, thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate the space and time to be able to have this conversation and to just exchange these sorts of ideas.
Yeah. Well, we'll have
may
more.
it continue. Yeah, may it
We'll be
continue.
coming back.
Can't wait.
All right. Thank you.
Be well. We'll speak soon.
You too.
Thanks for listening. May this episode inspire you to move forward. Be sure to go to iTunes, Spotify, katebyrne.co, that's KATEBYRNE.co, or wherever you listen to your podcasts, and listen to even more episodes. Here's to strong women. May we know them, may we be them, may we raise them. And be sure to meet them on the next Women Advancing. Ta till next time.